Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and today I have a great guest on, Troy Ritchie. And the reason why I think this guest is great is because I've seen several of his content, his podcast, and I think he does a great job of covering the topics and the areas that he specializes in. So, welcome to the show, Troy.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, before we jump into, your, the content that you share and how
Sure.
you really do a lot to help people really make some mental shifts when it comes down to like the sales side of the business and everything. What was your background
Yeah.
before you got into creating content?
Well, it's interesting. People will call me a sales guru. I'm not really a sales guru. I call myself an audience engagement expert. And I get that term from the days being in a rock and roll band, right? We were a rock and roll band and we weren't that good. So we would always be criticized by the garage bands. And I said, I would tell them, when you're ready to come out of the garage and do 100 shows a year like we're doing, then come and talk to me, right? And so I don't really wait for perfection. I never have, and I've been criticized for it. It's fine. Stylistically, people, they want to perfect their craft. You can see I think the other day, one of my content pieces, grainy, my hair was all whacked, and right in the middle of me spitting fire, I was like, "Look at my hair. What is wrong with my hair?" I mean, it is what it is, and so we had to keep the audience's attention, right? And how do you do that when musically you're not as talented as some of our peers? We'd go to festivals and we weren't the joke because when we got on stage, the crowd would come up, right? And so we learned to entertain and we learned to just be a tight unit. And that combined with working in the credit department. So my day job I was in the credit department.
Mhm.
My wife worked a six-figure salary opportunity with her dad in the stock market, and I was a rock and roll guy. We bought the
Gotcha.
van, we bought the trailer, and we got married. And I was told that my wife was pregnant. I was on the road near Nashville, and we traveled from Seattle to Virginia and back. But just the ability to collect money
Mhm.
through B2B collections really trains you up on how to sell
Gotcha.
and booking a band. And so the reason I wrap it up with this, um, my focus is always on the audience. And so when I coach on clients or when I help people with their personal brand, they've got great ideas
Mhm.
and they tell me they're great ideas. And it's always from their perspective. I'm the guy that says, so what?
Yeah.
Right? My interview at 12:30, I'm not sold,
Mhm.
which is good because I need to be sold in order to transfer that feeling right to others. So that was my foundation: is being in a rock and roll band, not being as talented as the others, and then calling on B2B collections.
Awesome. Now, there's a couple of things that you mentioned that I definitely
Yeah,
want to, or a couple of things about you that I definitely wanted
yeah,
to highlight in our quick interview. The 4 a.m. wake up call. Tell us a
yes,
little bit about that. Like, how did that come
yeah.
about?
Well, I read a book. I think it was by Dale Carnegie, How to Stop Worrying, and he had written about small daily wins, and that I played high school sports. You may have played high school sports, man. That feeling of winning goes away, right? Once you're done playing sports. And so the Lord told me like 10 years ago, I was like having a conversation. I was debating the Lord. And I said, how do I get out of this mess? And the answer was 9 to 4. I'm like,
Wow.
9 to 4. What in the world does that mean? That was my sleep schedule. Well,
Mhm.
I asked, he responded, and I had been like, who wakes up at 4 a.m., right? I never did it for like 10 years. And then I read this book about daily wins. And so I stack my life with an opportunity to win.
Mhm.
So I wake up at 4 a.m. Why? Because nobody else does. Rarely people do, right?
Mhm.
I take cold showers. Why? I don't have to take cold showers. I don't have to wake up at 4 a.m. But these small, because people put their energy and effort into trying to win something they can't control.
Mhm.
I'm late to this podcast because Zoom wouldn't, open. right? So I had to delete it and download it. That's not in my control.
Mhm.
And so what do I control? I control my sleep schedule. I control my uh, taking a shower. I mean, there's not a lot. And this is what I tell kids in the Clark County School District public school system here. I'm like, find things that you control and go win. Because when you start stacking small wins, guess what? They give you momentum for the bigger wins that you don't control. So that's my philosophy in that 4 a.m. daily wake up. I don't do the podcast at 4 a.m. I do other things. It's around 5 a.m. by the time I get to that, but it's a lot of fun.
Okay, awesome. And then also the Spitfire
Yes.
podcast. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I don't have a Spitfire podcast. I Spitfire.
Ah.
And so, but the other two podcasts I have are more video and they're interviews. So there's two types of podcasting format. One is the one we're on now, interview format, and the other one is the show format. And I think a lot of influencers and content creators are missing out on a tremendous opportunity of what I call spit and fire. Like right now, you're interviewing me. I'm sure you have a lot of good things to say. So when you, like the old radio jockeys, right? The shock jocks, they get on the microphone and they talk, and there's no back and forth. I think both formats are good. Both formats are needed. But the 4 a.m. daily wake up is a show format. And then I have the Always Go Big interview podcast. I have a guest, Sally Illingsworth, next week, which I'm really excited about. She helped influence me to write the book.
Nice.
Interviewed Shay Rowbottom, Jackie, who you've interviewed. That's the Always Go Big interview podcast. And it's not about expertise. It's about tell your personal story. In other words, before you broke big, right? We want to hear about it. And then the other podcast is the What Say You podcast. And that is talking about controversial topics. Like for November, it'll probably be about the election. And the problem with this country is we can't have differing opinions without getting mad at each other. And so the point of this What Say You podcast is like, let's talk about it civilly. Let's be kind and just sure, you disagree with me. That's okay. That's actually pretty cool that you disagree with me. Can we talk about it and then have an audience watch that exchange? That's not a debate show. There's too many debate shows, but just like, well, here's my perspective on the election. Well, here's my perspective on the election. I mean, I think that'd be pretty cool.
Awesome. And the last question before we wrap up is,
Yeah.
You're doing an amazing job with the content, and like I said, I love the philosophy that you talked about. Like, hey, I'm not waiting for it to get perfect to start getting the ball rolling, because I use that same approach myself. But
Awesome.
What's one piece of advice you would give to other people about creating content?
Yeah. Buy my book here. I'll do a shameless plug. It's very hard for me to do this, but I've been told I got to do it. So this is my book. It just got published last week. It's called You Got It, Now Go Get It. And so when you talk about creating content, create it because I've coached a lot of entrepreneurs and they know the algorithm, they know Instagram, LinkedIn, and they know that if I put together a content calendar, I can generate exposure for my brand. The problem is that when it becomes heavy, don't do it. Right? I mean, your content should not be a burden for you to produce content. And so, what I like to talk to people about is before you spitfire, who are you? Simon Sinek wrote the book Start With Why. I kind of disagree with that, unless they know who you are, right? And all the examples he gives. Apple, Martin Luther King, the Wright brothers, those are all people that others knew about already. We know Apple. So when they start with why, we resonate with it. And so entrepreneurs have read that book. They know what they do. They do it really well. They know why they do it, and they don't know who they are, man. They got an identity crisis. So you got these influencers that are depressed, that are hurting inside, and they're fantastic content creators. Yeah. So I tell people, start with who are you, and what is your identity, and what gives you joy, and what makes you just get so fired up to do what you do. Find that. And once you find that, spit fire on it. And that's your content, right? And then if your hair's all wiggity whack, or you're not in the perfect, the lighting's bad, or your, whatever happens, the content will shine through, right?
Awesome.
Because a lot of these folks are they're masking their weak content with really polished, published work. I say let the content drive it, right? And then my buddy Peter Lynch wrote a book called The Ugly Advantage. There's an article in my book called The Power of Suck. When you can be authentic and show those blemishes, man, it has greater influence. It really does.
Awesome. Well, Troy, thank you so much for being able to fit this into your schedule. I really appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy putting out some great content. So it was a pleasure having you on for a quick minute to talk about all the great stuff that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like our content, be sure to follow us on social media. And if you want to see more of our exclusive content, you can subscribe and become a member on patreon.com/Business Talk Library. Hey, the Business Talk Library is the place where business makes sense.